I'm Mariah Blake, 28. The emotional one of the family, or so they say. The conference room at the Courtyard Marriott smelled like too much perfume and not enough truth. Beige walls, chairs in a stiff circle, and a plastic fruit platter sweating under the fluorescent lights. There were 17 of them. Aunts, cousins, my mom, 2 uncles I hadn't seen in 3 years, and my older brother Devin, who somehow always looked like he just walked off a political campaign flyer. They sat waiting for me like I was a defendant about to plead guilty. The moment I walked in, every face tightened. Some offered tight-lipped smiles. Others just looked through me like I was a cloudy window. No one got up. "Mariah," said Aunt Linda, motioning to the only empty chair directly in the center of the circle. "We just want to talk." I paused in the doorway, my hand still clutching my bag strap. I could hear the ice machine groaning from the hallway behind me, the buzz of air conditioning. Someone cleared their throat. It sounded rehearsed. "This isn't an ambush," my mom added. Her hands were folded in her lap, knuckles white. "We just love you and we're worried." That's when I saw the printouts. My tweets. My Instagram stories. Someone had even highlighted my captions. "When your family breaks you but still expects you to RSVP?" That one had a pink marker star beside it. Neatly underlined in pen, manipulative behavior. I sat down anyway. Devin was the first to speak. "Mariah, you've been making a lot of people uncomfortable lately. The things you post, the voice messages, the drama. It's like you want attention." I turned to him slowly. "You mean the voice messages you all leave me?" He didn't blink. "You twist things. You escalate. You talk like you're in some movie." They were all nodding now, like a choir of calm condemnation. "I told you she'd get defensive," murmured Aunt Linda. My eyes flicked to my cousin Sierra, who had the gall to look pained. This was the girl who once texted me, "You're overreacting," when I was in the ER after a panic attack. Now she sat across from me, acting like she'd wept over my every breath. "I just think you should take accountability," she said softly. Accountability. That was the word they loved to use when they wanted me to shrink. I reached into my bag. Devin raised an eyebrow. "Mariah, don't make this a thing." But I'd already pulled out the small black speaker. Bluetooth. Fully charged. I tapped it on, thumb holding down the play button on my phone. A beep. A chime. "Then you seriously need to stop texting me like this. It's not cute anymore. You sound unhinged." That was Devin. 3 weeks ago. Another beep. "Maybe if you didn't make everything so dramatic, people would actually want to help you." "Sierra, during my last hospital stay, I'm not driving 2 hours for your birthday if you're just gonna cry again." Aunt Linda. One by one. The voicemails played. Their voices casual, cruel, cutting, filling the room like a flood they couldn't hold back. I looked up between clips. They weren't nodding anymore. Some looked down. Others stared like I'd slapped them. My mom reached for her necklace, twisting it tight around her finger. When the last message ended, I let the silence settle. Then I looked directly at Devin. "I'm not in a movie. This is real life. You just never liked hearing it out loud." No one spoke. The air conditioning hummed. The fruit platter dripped onto its tray. Someone's phone vibrated gently. Ignored. I leaned back. "If you've ever been through something like this," I said, voice shaking just a little, "drop a comment or let me know where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if family drama ever made you feel invisible too." That's when the door opened. The hotel manager stepped in, clipboard in hand, not looking at me, looking at Devin. "Excuse me," she said politely, "but are you the one who booked this room under Blake Holdings?" Devin straightened. "Yes. Is there an issue?" She scanned her paper, Actually, it seems the corporate account was transferred this morning to Mariah Blake. She's the new primary contact. We were just confirming the catering invoice with her office. Devin blinked. Wait. What? She turned to me, smiling faintly. Ms. Blake, if you'd like anything changed about the setup, just let us know. I nodded once. Thank you. That'll be all. The manager left, and the silence after that, it wasn't judgment anymore. It was confusion. It was fear. And for the first time in years, they were all finally looking at me. Devin didn't say anything at first. His mouth opened, then shut, as if rebooting mid-sentence. I could see the wheels turning his brain trying to recalibrate the reality shift he hadn't seen coming. My mother, meanwhile, glanced at me with something between confusion and recognition. She wasn't used to seeing me like this. Not calm, not cornered, not about to cry. Just still. I'd been silent long enough for them to misname me, but the silence had been useful. It gave me time to collect the receipts, literal and emotional. Cousin Sierra was the first to speak after the hotel manager left. Wait. What was she talking about? What account? I locked eyes with her. The family trust account. The one Aunt May set up for the grandkids before she passed. It matured last month. There was a ripple through the room. Unspoken, but heavy. Devin sat forward. You're joking. I'm not, I said. May left her shares of Blake Holdings to all 6 of us cousins. Equal distribution, but she gave one of us proxy rights. Linda's eyes narrowed. And who? Did she choose? I took a breath. Me. The room didn't explode, it imploded. Every polite face cracked just slightly. Every neutral smile flickered like a power outage. Devin's voice dropped half an octave. That makes no sense. You haven't even been to a shareholders meeting in 3 years? I was attending them virtually. You just never asked. He scoffed, but his fingers twitched like he'd touched something hot. Linda folded her arms. So what? You show up, play some voicemails, and now we're supposed to believe you've been the puppet master this whole time. I tilted my head. No. Linda, I'm not a puppet master. I'm just the one who kept receipts while the rest of you were performing civility. She went quiet. It wasn't revenge I felt in that moment. It wasn't triumph either. It was weight. Lifting. The dull pressure in my chest that I'd learned to call just being sensitive, it eased a little. I could breathe. And it wasn't because I'd won. It was because I'd stopped playing along. 3 weeks earlier. I'd gotten the letter from the lawyer handling May's estate. A thick, cream-colored envelope with my name spelled out in black calligraphy. Inside was a notarized document naming me proxy and a note in May's own handwriting. The quiet one, here's everything. Use this when the time is right. Love. May. I'd cried when I read that. Not because of the power it gave me, but because it meant someone saw me, even when I was silent. That same night, I started going through the voicemails. I backed them up, labeled them by date, and saved duplicates to an encrypted drive. Not for revenge, just in case they ever tried to twist my story again. It didn't take long. 2 days after the letter, I got the group text from Devin. We're holding a family meeting, just to clear the air. Come if you want to grow up a little. I didn't respond, just showed up with my speaker. And now, here we were. Uncle Greg, who hadn't said a word all morning, finally leaned back and muttered, "Well, damn." The circle broke. People stood up, whispered. I heard someone hiss, "She's not stable." Another voice muttered, "Should have never brought her." I stood too. If I'm so unstable, why was I the only one Aunt May trusted with her majority vote? Devin laughed bitterly. Maybe she didn't know who you really were. I looked at him. Or maybe she did. Then I walked out. Not stormed. Not ran. Just walked. The hallway was cool, quieter. My heels echoed on the patterned carpet, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was shrinking with every step. Outside, the sun was sharp and the sky too blue for how surreal I felt. I leaned against the brick pillar near the entrance, pulled out my phone, and just breathed. That's when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned expecting Linda or Devin, ready to throw one last guilt grenade. It was my cousin Ava. Not one of the loud ones. Ava was like me, always on the edges, always watching. She held up her hand awkwardly. Hey. Hey. She looked at the sidewalk, then back at me. That was intense. I waited. She fidgeted with her necklace. I just wanted to say thank you. For what you did. My guard stayed up. Why? Because I have my own folder of voicemails, and I've never had the guts to play them. That hit harder than anything Devin said. I stared at her, then handed her the speaker. Want to borrow it sometime? A small, almost shy smile. Yeah, maybe I will. We stood in silence for a second. Then she said, Do you want to get out of here? I nodded. God. Yes. We walked to the parking lot. No one tried to stop us. Inside my car, with the AC humming, Ava asked quietly, How did it feel? I didn't answer right away. Just watched the windshield wipers twitch once across the dry glass. Then I said, like I was finally in the room, not just watching from behind the glass. She nodded. We didn't go far. Just to a diner 10 minutes down the road. I ordered black coffee and pancakes. Ava got a milkshake, the kind with whipped cream and a cherry on top. We didn't talk much, but for the first time in months, the silence between us wasn't tense. It was peaceful, safe. After breakfast, we sat in my car for a while longer. Ava looked at me. Do you think they'll come after you? Try to reverse the vote. They might, I said, but I documented everything, and the lawyers have it. She let out a breath. Okay, good. I stared at the horizon. They called me dramatic, but maybe I was just too loud for their comfort and too honest for their control. Neither of us said anything for a while after that, but I could feel it. Something shifting. Not in them. In me. Back at my apartment. The voicemail speaker sat on the kitchen counter like a loaded weapon. I didn't touch it. Didn't need to. The damage had already been done, not in the way they thought, with chaos and explosions, but in the way a splinter finally works its way out from under skin, quiet, necessary. That night, I lay on the couch instead of my bed. Just me, the hum of the fridge, and the city outside my window. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't play music. I needed the silence, and for once, it didn't feel like punishment. By morning, my phone was full of notifications, a few texts from unknown numbers. 2 cousins I hadn't heard from in years sent me vague, overly cheerful messages testing the water. Devin hadn't messaged at all, but I noticed he'd removed me from the Blake Holdings family group chat. No announcement, no warning, just erased. I laughed to myself. It felt like middle school again, when he'd convince our mom I was too unstable to join him and his friends at the movies. I'd end up home alone, watching whatever DVD was left in the player and wondering what I'd done wrong. But this time, I wasn't crying. I was documenting. I opened a new folder on my laptop and titled it, Evidence of Erasure. I screenshotted the group chat removal. Took note of every cousin who stopped replying, forwarded suspicious texts to my lawyer. I wasn't paranoid, I was prepared. Later that week, I walked into a boardroom on the 32nd floor of a downtown office building with floor-to-ceiling windows and a mahogany table that felt too polished for people who lied so easily. It was the quarterly shareholders meeting. My first one in person. Devin was already there, seated at the far end with two other members of the family, Uncle Greg and Aunt Linda. All three of them stiff in their suits, faces stretched thin into polite neutrality. A younger man I didn't recognize stood beside the projector setup, nodding to himself as he adjusted a spreadsheet on the screen. I took the seat directly across from Devin. No hesitation, no invitation. "Mariah," he said flatly, "didn't think you'd show up in person. I figured it's time I stopped being the invisible vote." He didn't reply. The meeting opened with standard minutes and budget updates. But the tension built steadily, like a kettle beginning to hiss. I kept my notepad open in front of me, even though I already knew what they were planning. I could see it in the way Linda kept glancing at her folder, at the way Greg tapped his pen 3 times before speaking. "Before we continue," Greg said, "we'd like to raise a motion to reevaluate the proxy assignment made by the late May Blake." There it was. I tilted my head. "Based on Linda spoke next, there's concern that you're not emotionally impartial, that the role might be better suited to someone with more experience, more male energy." I interrupted, my voice steady. "Or is it just that I didn't ask for permission first?" Devin jumped in. "No one's trying to remove you, Mariah. We just want to make sure decisions are made for the good of the company, not for revenge." Revenge. There it was again. Their favorite way to frame my presence. As if I'd entered the boardroom with a dagger, not a document. I leaned forward. "You're worried about my emotions, but let's talk numbers." I opened my folder and slid a report across the table. "That's the Q4 performance of our outreach department. You've been bleeding funds into a marketing campaign that generated no real conversion. Meanwhile, I allocated a fraction of those resources into a digital campaign that increased engagement by 27% in 6 weeks. That was before I had voting power. Just me, pitching in from the outside." The man at the projector raised an eyebrow and adjusted his notes. I kept going. "If anyone's acting emotionally, it's the people who threw an intervention instead of picking up the phone to ask how I was actually doing." Silence. Greg cleared his throat. "This isn't personal, Mariah." I smiled. "To you, maybe not." The motion to reevaluate the proxy was introduced. It failed by 1 vote mine. And because of the clause in May's will, mine carried double weight if the vote was tied. The motion died on the table, after the meeting, as everyone packed their bags and closed laptops. The man at the projector, Derek, as I later learned, walked over. "That was surgical," he said, half amused. I shrugged. "I've had practice." He offered his hand. "Derek Langston. I'm the firm's new financial analyst. You and I should talk more. You clearly understand leverage." I shook his hand. It was firm, but not condescending. "Thanks, Derek." I just finally decided to stop letting people treat me like a footnote. When I left the building, the wind had picked up. It tugged gently at the hem of my coat. The city felt sharper, like I'd stepped into a different version of it, one where I wasn't just walking through shadows but creating them. That weekend, I drove to May's old house. It had been left to the family, though no one had dared to touch it yet. It sat on a quiet stretch of land just outside the city white porch, creaking steps, ivy climbing up the siding. I let myself in with the key I still had. The air inside was thick with dust and memories. Sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, catching particles in gold strands. I walked through the room slowly, running my fingers along familiar door frames. The floor still creaked in all the same places. In her study, I found a letter I hadn't seen before, folded neatly inside a cookbook. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It simply read, "They will only call you dramatic until they see you win. Don't hand them your softness if they won't protect it, but never lose it, either." I folded the letter back, placed it in my coat pocket. I stood there for a while, looking around the room, not knowing what I was waiting for. Maybe nothing. Maybe just a moment to exhale. My phone buzzed. A new voicemail. I didn't check who it was. Just played it. Mariah. It's Mom. I don't know what to say. I guess I didn't know everything. Maybe I didn't want to. But I saw the meeting notes. And I just want you to know. You're not invisible anymore. Not to me. I didn't cry. I just stood there, eyes closed, letting the words land where they needed to. For once, someone had called me without asking for anything. No demand, no correction, just recognition. And that, somehow, felt louder than every voicemail I'd ever saved. By Monday morning, I was back in the office, not my family's office. Their world was polished glass and padded chairs. Mine was a cramped third-floor co-working space with a window that overlooked a brick wall and a half-dead fern in the corner no one claimed. But it was mine. My consulting business had been quiet lately. I'd turned away a few clients during the family fallout, mostly to protect my own bandwidth. But I wasn't worried. The silence felt more like incubation than failure. Something was shifting beneath the surface. I could feel it. I pulled out my laptop and opened my inbox. 32 unread messages. One caught my eye. Subject: private inquiry regarding strategic brand revival. The sender: Derek Langston. I clicked. Mariah. I know it's last minute, but I just sat in on a meeting with a startup in trouble, talented founders. Zero sense of market psychology. They need someone who understands narrative and pressure points. You were the first name I thought of. Want to join me for the consult? No suits required. Derek. I smiled. Not because of the opportunity, but because someone saw exactly what I brought to the table and named it. Not emotional intelligence, not instinct, narrative and pressure points. I replied with one word: absolutely. That afternoon, we met at a minimalist startup hub across town, all concrete floors and motivational posters like "Fail Forward" and "Disrupt Yourself." The founders were two 20-somethings in identical hoodies who looked equally terrified and over-caffeinated. Their startup was a mental wellness app targeting young men, but the branding was all soft pastels and generic affirmations. Nothing landed. Nothing provoked. It felt like something built to be approved by HR, not downloaded by anyone in pain. Derek introduced me quickly. Mariah is a narrative strategist. She's here to help us understand what's not being said. The taller founder, Reed, gave me a skeptical smile. So, you write taglines? I leaned forward. No, I write war maps. You have a product for men who won't go to therapy. Your first mistake is thinking they want to feel better. They don't. They want to feel powerful again. You're selling lavender when what they need is steel. He blinked, then scribbled something down. For the next hour. I dismantled their soft approach, not by being aggressive but by revealing the quiet truth: most men in their market didn't want help. They wanted language that made strength sound like healing, not surrender. I watched as their resistance turned into curiosity into trust. When I left, Reed followed me out and said, "Honestly, you made me rethink everything. You didn't try to please us. You just said it." I nodded. That's what no one did for me. The next few weeks passed like a series of soft landings. Derek brought me into 2 more projects. Word spread. People started asking about the girl who dismantled her own family with nothing but receipts and composure. But it wasn't about the buzz. It was about something subtler. I was being invited. Not tolerated. Not asked to prove myself. Invited. Then came the message I didn't expect. It was from Devin. "Mariah, if you're free sometime soon, I'd like to talk. No group. No setup. Just us." I think I got some things wrong. I stared at the message for a full 10 minutes before answering. Coffee. Wednesday. Your treat. When Wednesday came, I chose the place. A small cafe near the river. All exposed brick and iron chairs. Devin arrived 5 minutes late. No tie, which was its own small miracle. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before, less curated, more real. He sat down slowly. You look good. I nodded. I feel clear. We both waited for the other to say something brave. He folded his hands. Look, I don't even know where to start. I've been trying to understand why May chose you, and I think I didn't want to. Because it messed with the story you built. I said. That I was unstable. That I wasn't strong enough to lead. He didn't deny it. You always made it sound like I was overreacting. I continued. Like my pain was a performance. But you never asked why I was performing in the first place. His face shifted. Something behind his eyes flickered. I thought I was protecting the family. But maybe I was just protecting my image of it. And maybe I was protecting myself by playing the villain you needed. We sat in silence. He finally said, I listened to the voicemails. All of them. You kept them. I nodded. Because I knew no one would believe me unless I could prove the tone, not just the words. The tone. He swallowed hard. You were never crazy. That's the thing about being called dramatic. I said. It's the easiest way to erase someone's reality, especially if she cries at the wrong time. Devin looked down. I don't expect forgiveness. Good, I said, because I'm not offering it as a reward. I'm offering distance. He met my eyes. Fair. After that, we didn't try to patch anything. We just sat with the quiet between us. And for once, it wasn't about blame or power. Just truth. Sitting uncomfortably at the table with two people who used to call each other family. As he left, he turned back once. You were always in the room. Mariah. I just never looked. That sentence didn't fix everything, but it was something. Back at my apartment, I lit a candle May had given me years ago. The label was faded. It smelled like cedar and burnt sugar. I let the flame burn a while, watching the wax melt down slow. I thought of all the times I'd been told I was too much, too sensitive, too reactive, too complicated. I was never too much. They were just used to silence, and silence makes cruelty seem reasonable. Now, the only silence I kept was intentional. I didn't need to raise my voice anymore. I was the room. The voicemail speaker was gone. I hadn't lost it. I'd given it away. Last week, I mailed it to Ava with a note. Your turn. No return address. No pressure. Just a clean black box wrapped in soft tissue, the weight of it heavier than it looked. It felt right, like passing on something sacred and slightly cursed. A relic of survival. A few days later, I received a photo from her. The speaker sitting on her kitchen counter next to a glass of water and a half-eaten sandwich. Nothing dramatic. No caption. Just presence. I didn't respond, and she didn't follow up. Some understandings don't need punctuation. I was starting to believe that most healing happens in the unspoken moments anyway, in the day after the confrontation, in the pause after you say enough, in the echo of your own voice when no one claps or replies. That morning, I opened my email and found an unexpected name in my inbox, Linda Blake. Mariah, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. I wanted to write, not because I think I deserve your time, but because you were right about me, about all of us. I replayed the speaker message with my voice, and I hated the sound of it. I hate that I said it, but I said it. No excuses, no asking for grace, just acknowledging it. I still don't understand you. I probably never will. But I know I owe you my silence from here on, not my opinions. If there's ever a moment you want to talk not about the company, not about the past, but about real things, I'll be here. If not, I'll still be here. Quiet. It didn't move me to tears, but it moved something. I'd spent years screaming into a void, conversations where I'd be called touchy, extra, hard to follow. Now they were whispering, maybe not understanding, but no longer talking over me. I forwarded the email to my lawyer and filed it in a new folder called Aftermath. Around noon, Derek messaged asking if I could meet him at the foundation his team was consulting for. Something about legacy donors, emotional optics, and needing someone who understands performance without performing. That last part made me laugh. I met him on the front steps of an old stone building that used to be a church. Now it housed a youth arts program. Inside, there were oil paintings on brick walls, poems pinned to corkboards, and chalk lines still ghosting the hardwood from a recent play rehearsal. The meeting was with a board of trustees, a mixture of professors, lawyers, and one ex-TV anchor with too much blush and a permanently skeptical brow. Derek introduced me with a smile. This is Mariah Blake. She has a background in narrative design and cultural dynamics. She's not here to flatter you. She's here to tell you where you've gone invisible. A few of them chuckled nervously. I stood up. You're wondering what makes me qualified to critique your story. The truth is, I'm not. I'm just someone who learned the hard way how dangerous it is when people write your story without asking you. Silence. I gestured around the room. These kids, these walls, these programs, they're trying to say something. But your funding letters read like apologies. Your vision statements are safer than silence. You say accessibility, but forget to say power. You use the word community, but never once mention class. A man in a blazer crossed his arms. We're not activists. No, I said. You're gatekeepers who think you're mentors. The woman with too much blush looked mildly horrified. Are you suggesting we're suppressing them? I'm suggesting you're sanitizing them. Silence again. But this time, no one walked out. Afterward, Derek leaned against the wall and gave a low whistle. You really don't hold back. I did for too long, I replied. Now I don't edit myself for comfort. We walked out onto the front steps together. The sun had dipped low enough to make the stone glow orange. Derek looked at me. Ever think of running your own program? I laughed. I can barely run my own plants. He shrugged. Still, you've got a voice people need. Not everyone knows how to take heat and turn it into architecture. That sentence sat with me the rest of the night. Back home, I opened a notebook and wrote down 5 words in the center of the page. This is not revenge. Then I wrote beneath it, this is restoration. I thought about May, about her letter in the cookbook, about how she must have seen the fracture coming long before any of us admitted it. She didn't save me. She didn't swoop in. She just handed me the match and waited to see what I'd build with the fire. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in a year. I invited people over. Just Ava and 2 friends from my old community theater days, Brandon and Tia. Nothing fancy. Wine, cheap pasta, mismatched chairs. I didn't clean the apartment obsessively. I didn't rehearse small talk. I didn't feel the need to explain why I'd been gone. We sat on the floor, passed a single candle around, and took turns saying 1 sentence each about what we'd burned to survive. Brandon said, I burned my need to be the favorite. Tia said, I burned the apology I never owed. Ava said, I burned the voicemail where I said sorry after someone else hurt me, when it was my turn. I held the candle and said, I burned the version of me that needed to be understood before I could speak. No one clapped. No one analyzed. But Tia leaned over and touched my shoulder gently. That night, after they left, I stood at the window and looked out at the city, no soundtrack, no filter. Just me and the quiet pulse of traffic and kitchen lights and lives happening in parallel. I wasn't healed. I wasn't whole. But I wasn't pretending anymore. I let that truth settle in my chest and fall into place like a lock clicking shut. And then, just as I turned away from the window, my phone buzzed. One new voicemail. No ID. I held my breath and pressed play. Hi, Mariah. You don't know me, but I saw the clip from the conference, the one where you said they called me dramatic because I showed the receipts. I just wanted to say, I've never heard someone explain it that way. You made me feel less alone. No name, no request, just that. I saved it, not in a folder of evidence, but in a folder titled Echo. Sometimes, the truth isn't what you shout, it's what answers back. The voicemail played in my head for days, not the words, but the tone, the softness, the vulnerability that didn't ask for anything. I'd spent years having to defend my voice, sharpen it, strip it of tremble. And now, suddenly, someone had spoken to me the way I had always wanted to be heard, like an equal in pain. Not a problem to be fixed. That night, I found myself sitting on the edge of my bed, the blue light of my laptop washing over my hands. I opened a blank document and typed, "They called me dramatic." A living archive of silenced truths. It wasn't a memoir. It wasn't even a proper essay. It was just a container. A place to pour the things that had nowhere else to go. Quotes, screenshots, fragments of dialogue I remembered verbatim, emails, voicemails, even texts I'd never responded to. I wasn't planning to publish it. I just needed to see it all in one place, not scattered across devices, memories, or sleepless nights. I needed to gather the fragments before I forgot that they'd ever been whole. By page 27, I realized something strange. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Not in the way I used to be, with the boiling urgency to prove myself right. Now, my anger was quieter, wiser, like an old friend who had stayed too long but helped me survive the winters. I clicked save and titled the document Draft 0. Not a book, not a weapon, just a witness. The next morning, I walked into my kitchen to find a small, neatly wrapped package on the floor by the door. No name, just a cream envelope taped to the top with my initials handwritten in blue ink, M.B. Inside the envelope, a card. You passed the test. Now build something. No signature, no hint, just that. I opened the box and found inside a black moleskin notebook with gold-edged pages and a fountain pen resting inside its own groove. Underneath the pen, one more line printed on a thin strip of card: legacy isn't inherited. It's authored. I stared at it for a long time, a slight tremble building in my chest. It wasn't from May. It couldn't be. But it felt like her, like something she would have orchestrated from beyond, through one of her friends or attorneys or allies she never told anyone about. I turned to the first page and wrote one line. The truth is not a performance. The truth is a mirror no one wants to look into. Then I closed the book and placed it beside the speaker's former resting place. An altar, in a way. Not to revenge, but to survival. That afternoon, Ava called. Her voice was shaking, but not weak. I played it, she said. Not in front of anyone, just to myself. I needed to hear it in full. I didn't say anything. Just let her breathe. She sniffed. You know what I realized? The worst thing about being gaslit isn't that people lie to you. It's that eventually you start believing the lie must be true, because otherwise, the silence makes no sense. Exactly, I whispered. She exhaled like something old had finally left her lungs. I want to record something. Not to post, just to say it. Would that be okay? Yes, I said. Use my mic. We met later that day in my living room. I set up my portable recorder, the same one I used in college when I used to write monologues for community theater. She sat on the rug with her legs crossed and a blanket around her shoulders like armor. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded. "I'm tired of keeping it neat." Then she pressed record and said only this: "I lied to survive. I said I was fine so they wouldn't leave. But they left anyway. Now I want my story back. Even the ugly parts." She pressed stop, handed the recorder back to me. We didn't speak for a full minute, but the silence between us wasn't empty. It was holy. That weekend, Derek invited me to a small private dinner for creatives and consultants who'd been involved in the Youth Foundation project. Nothing formal, just good wine, pasta, and shared stories. We gathered in the candlelit back patio of a small restaurant that didn't even have a sign out front. You had to know someone to find it. A woman across from me, gray streak in her bun, sleeves rolled to the elbows, leaned forward at one point and asked, "So what do you actually do?" "Mariah." I twirled my wine glass slowly. "I help people tell the truth, especially the kind that doesn't sound good in a press release." She grinned. "So, you're an exorcist." The table laughed, but I didn't. I just looked at her and said, "Sometimes, yes." The conversation shifted to lighter things after that, but something lingered, a subtle awareness. Like they could see I wasn't just there to network or to be polite. I wasn't playing a part. I was being still. After dessert, Derek pulled me aside as we helped clear plates. "You know," he said, "I've seen a lot of people weaponize their pain. But you—" He paused, searching for the right word. "You made a toolbox out of it." That stayed with me. Later that night, I lay in bed replaying everything, not with anxiety, but curiosity. I wasn't bracing for impact anymore. I wasn't pre-writing apologies in my head. Instead, I kept hearing Ava's voice on the recorder. "Now I want my story back. Even the ugly parts." That's what it came down to. Not justice, not control, not vindication. Just the quiet power of reclaiming what was once stolen by silence. And not because someone handed it back. Because you walked in, took it off the shelf, dusted it off, and said, "This is mine now." Before I fell asleep, I opened my laptop and began writing again. Not about the intervention, not about the company shares, but about the look in someone's eyes when you finally tell the truth, and they can't blink it away. The look of someone realizing they never really knew you, and the look you give back calm, steady, whole. Not to say I told you so, but to say I told myself the truth anyway. 2 weeks after the dinner, I was invited to speak on a panel titled "The Unspoken in Storytelling." I almost didn't go. Not because I was nervous, though I was, but because I wasn't sure I believed in the premise. That people actually wanted to hear what's unspoken, that they wouldn't flinch when the raw pieces were brought into the light. But Derek had referred me, and the organizer sent a personal note. "You don't have to be polished. Just be honest. We've had enough panels about brand tone and voice. We want soul." So I showed up in a blazer over jeans, hair in a soft knot, speaker mic in my tote bag out of habit, not need. The event was hosted in a converted loft space, soft Edison bulbs hanging from exposed beams, mismatched chairs, an audience of about 50. Some wore name tags. Some looked like they'd just wandered in. I took my seat on stage beside 2 other panelists, a published poet and a retired trauma therapist who'd started writing short stories in her 60s. The moderator introduced us with warmth, but didn't waste time on fluff. "Let's start here," she said. "What's the most important truth you weren't allowed to say until recently?" There was a pause. The poet answered first. Something about not being allowed to name loneliness without someone trying to fix it. The therapist said that I loved my son, but I didn't like him for the first 2 years. The room laughed uneasily. Then it was my turn. I held the mic with both hands, like it might float away if I didn't anchor it. I wasn't allowed to say that I didn't feel safe with people who said they loved me. I said, silence. Then I continued. They used the language of concern, the tone of duty. But what I felt underneath was power. I was only lovable when I was manageable, and I stopped being manageable when I started asking them to hear me. The moderator blinked, then whispered into her mic, "Thank you." The audience didn't clap. Not right away. It wasn't a moment designed for applause. It was something else, recognition. Maybe. A kind of stillness you can't fake. After the panel, people approached me one by one, not with business cards, not with fake praise, just quiet voices, small confessions. My sister says I overreact every time I cry. One woman said, but when I laugh too loud, she says I'm manic. A young man with trembling fingers whispered, I've recorded every voicemail from my dad since I came out. Not to use against him, just to remember what it feels like to be erased in real time. I nodded. Keep them, even if you never listen again. He smiled. I already do. By the time I left the venue, I felt full. Not with validation, but with presence. Like every piece of me had been allowed in the room without having to argue for its right to exist. Back home, I poured a glass of water, sat by the window, and opened a blank page in my notebook. I wrote one sentence. When people say you're dramatic, they're often reacting to the sound of their own cruelty played back to them in a voice they can't control. I closed the notebook. I didn't need to post it. I just needed to know it was real. The next morning, my mom called. I let it ring twice before answering. Hi, I said. She hesitated. You sound peaceful. I almost smiled. I am. There was a long pause on the line. She finally said, I've been thinking about everything. About that day in the hotel. I didn't defend you. You didn't. I agreed. She let the silence sit for a while. Then I always thought if I stayed neutral, I was doing the right thing. Neutrality isn't love, Mom. It's just silence with a nicer outfit. She didn't argue. She just sighed. And for once, it sounded like surrender, not defeat. But the kind that comes before someone finally tells the truth. I want to know who you are now, she said. Not who I thought I was raising. That caught me off guard. I softened. Then listen. Not just to what I say, but to what I stop saying. She exhaled. Okay. We didn't resolve anything that day, but she asked if we could have lunch. Just her and me. No cousins. No Devin. No side eyes over soup. I said yes. That weekend, we met at a quiet cafe tucked into a garden courtyard. She wore a powder blue cardigan and had done her makeup like she was meeting someone important. She didn't compliment me. She didn't bring gifts. She just sat, palms flat on the table, and said, Tell me. So I told her. About the night I cried in my dorm room after Devin posted that group photo without me. About the time Linda told me I needed to lower my voice if I wanted to be loved. About how it felt to sit through holidays being spoken over, nodded at, and then edited out of family retellings. She listened, fully. No defense, no attempt to sanitize. At one point, her lip trembled, and she reached for her water like it might stop the shaking. I didn't know, she whispered. I know, I said, but not knowing doesn't make it hurt less. I want to do better. Then start with believing me even when it's inconvenient. She nodded slowly. We parted with a long hug, the kind that doesn't promise healing, but offers room. On the way home, I found myself thinking not about revenge or justice, or even truth, but about memory, how fragile it is, how easily rewritten, and how powerful it becomes when it's reclaimed, reshaped, and spoken out loud by the person who lived it. That night, I created a password-protected folder titled Inherited Silence. Inside it, I uploaded every recording, every email, every message I'd ever saved. Not to use, not to share, just to keep safe, just in case the world tried to tell me again that none of it ever happened. At the top of the folder, I uploaded an audio file, my own voice saying, calmly, I was there, I felt it. And I remember, it was only 6 seconds long, but it was the most powerful thing I had ever made. A month passed, then another. No interventions, no family meetings, no new voicemails from Devin, Linda, or the rest of the cousins. It was like they'd agreed, silently, to live without me. Or rather, without the version of me they could mold and muffle. I didn't mind. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. I spent my days working with small clients, authors, startups, even a few nonprofits that had heard about the narrative strategist who doesn't flinch. It wasn't glamorous. There were no viral tweets, no interviews, just slow, steady presence. I liked it that way. And then one morning, an email came in with the subject line, podcast invitation, let's talk about the uncomfortable stuff. I opened it half distracted, assuming it was spam, but it wasn't. It was from a podcast called The Room is Spinning, one I'd listened to during long drives or nights I couldn't sleep. The host, Camille Rhodes, was known for cutting through noise, no fluff, no fake healing, just real conversations that unraveled people quietly. Honestly, she wrote, Mariah, I read the transcript of your panel. A friend sent it to me and said, this woman sounds like someone who doesn't blink. I knew I wanted you on the show before I even finished reading. We don't do interviews. We do conversations. Real ones. The kind you wish someone had recorded when everything was falling apart. If you're open, I'd love to have you. Camille. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't respond right away. I made coffee, watered my plants, answered other emails. Then I came back and typed, yes, I'm in. Let's talk about the things no one wants to say out loud. We scheduled the recording for a Thursday. No studio, just a Zoom call, clean audio, no edits. If you mess up, you mess up, Camille said with a grin when we first connected. That's how we keep the ghosts in. When the recording started, her voice was steady and low. So, Mariah, what's something you were afraid to say before, but can say now? I didn't hesitate. I used to think being left out meant I was broken, but now I know it just meant I stopped playing the role they wrote for me. Camille nodded slowly. What role was that? The soft disruptor, I said. The one who could tell the truth, but gently, with disclaimers, with smiles. And when I stopped sugarcoating it, they called me dramatic, difficult, unwell. There was a pause, a breath. And how did you respond? Camille asked. I stopped asking them to believe me, I said, and I started believing myself. The rest of the episode unfolded like a memory I didn't know I still carried. I talked about the voicemails, the intervention, the fruit tray sweating under fluorescent lights. I mentioned May's letter, the silent apology from Linda, the whispered recording Ava made on my floor. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't feeling anything, but because I didn't need to prove I felt it. After we stopped recording, Camille leaned into the screen and said, that was a sermon, not an episode. I smiled. I've stopped performing. That helps. The episode went live a week later. I didn't promote it. I didn't even post about it. But the messages came, not dozens, hundreds. A woman wrote, they said I weaponized my sadness. I thought it was my fault. Thank you for reminding me that survival has a tone, And it isn't always polite. A teenage girl said I saved your words to my phone. I play them before I go to sleep. They make me feel real. A man messaged I was the Devon in my family. Thank you for helping me see the damage of asking people to perform calmness just to keep us comfortable. I saved every message, but I didn't respond to all of them. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't hold every story and stay upright. Instead, I created a subfolder in Echo and titled it, "You're Not Alone," just their words. No analysis, no replies, a library of ache and awakening. One morning, I got a text from Ava. I think I'm ready to tell it. Publicly. Will you come? Attached was a flyer. Spoken truth. A night of unfiltered voices. Open mic. No apologies. Hosted at the Red Curtain Collective Saturday. 7:30 p.m. I replied. Wouldn't miss it. The venue was small. An old converted bookstore turned black box theater. The kind of space where every sound echoed. Every breath felt amplified. Ava was fourth on the list. She stood center stage. Nothing but a single spotlight and a mic on a stand. No notes. No paper. Just her. She cleared her throat and said, "They called me over-emotional, so I learned how to laugh at my own trauma before they could. I made it funny, palatable. I turned it into content. But it wasn't a joke. Silence. I'm not here to blame them." She said, "I'm here because I finally know the truth. I wasn't too much. They were too practiced in denial." There was a long pause. Then she said, "And if you're in this room and you've ever felt erased, let this mic be your witness. You're not invisible. You're just unedited." Applause. Loud. Fierce. Sustained. I clapped until my palms ached. Afterward, she came down the steps and hugged me. "You were the first person who let me be messy and still believed me," she whispered. I held her tighter. "You gave me the same." Outside the venue, the air was warm. Summer clung to the sidewalks, and people buzzed out into the street like static. I stayed behind a moment, watching the empty stage through the window. I thought of the hotel conference room, the circle of chairs, the fruit tray, the Bluetooth speaker, and I realized something I hadn't before. They hadn't just tried to silence me, they'd tried to flatten me, to make me one note, predictable, digestible. And I had become the opposite. I had become layered, unfolding in ways they could no longer contain. I smiled to myself, stepped back from the window, and walked into the streetlight's glow, the buzz of cars and laughter and city night pressing gently against my skin. There were no voicemails waiting on my phone, no apology texts, no new interventions. Just a quiet message from Ava. We should host our own panel. No edits. Just truth. I replied, already planning it. Because this time, the room wouldn't be set up in a circle of control. This time, the mic would pass from hand to hand. No moderation, no corrections. And this time, no one would be asked to lower their voice to be heard. We called it the unmuted mic. Not a panel, not a performance, a gathering, no stage, no RSVP list, just an open door, folding chairs, and a sign at the entrance that read, "Tell it badly, tell it broken, just tell it." Ava and I found the space through a friend, a warehouse-style studio downtown with whitewashed brick walls and a ceiling that cracked in one corner from years of ignored water damage. It wasn't perfect. That was the point. We set up with string lights, a borrowed mic, and a plastic donation jar labeled for snacks and survival. The first night, 24 people showed up. We printed name tags, but most people didn't use them. They preferred to stay unnamed. Or maybe they were just tired of being named by others. The stories started small. A woman read a letter she'd never sent to her brother. A teenage boy shared a poem he wrote during a hospital stay. A man who hadn't spoken in public in over a decade told the room he hadn't cried since his father's funeral, but that tonight, he might. And no one laughed. No one flinched. They just listened. Still. Open. When it was my turn, I didn't bring notes. I didn't rehearse. I stood in the middle of the room and let the air settle before I spoke. I used to think I needed a full sentence to be believed. I said. But sometimes the most honest thing you can say is just, "That hurt." Silence. Not awkward. Reverent. Then I added, "They called me dramatic when I named what was happening, because pretending is more comfortable than truth." And I stopped pretending. No applause. Just one person in the back whispering, "Same." The meeting ran over. We stayed until midnight. People didn't want to leave. Some cried. Some laughed in relief. Some just sat with their eyes closed, listening to the sound of real things being said in real time. After everyone left, I found myself standing in the middle of the room again, alone this time, staring up at the string lights. Ava walked over and stood beside me. "Do you realize what you started?" she asked. I shook my head. "It's not about starting anything. It's about not stopping. We agreed to do it monthly. The next one had 47 people, then 80. By the third, someone brought cameras. We said no filming, no editing, just memory." One night, a woman approached me after the event, late 40s, sharp eyes, trembling voice. "You're Mariah," she said, "the voicemail girl." I smiled. I guess that's one way to say it. She looked down at her hands. "My daughter said you made her feel brave enough to stop apologizing for crying at work." I nodded. "Then she's already freer than I ever was at her age." She took a breath. "Thank you." "No," I said. "Thank you for listening to her." That's where the cycle breaks. She walked away without saying anything else. Some moments don't need an ending. At home that night, I pulled out the notebook May left me, the one with gold edges and the note tucked in the back. I hadn't touched it in weeks. This time, I opened to the last blank page, and I wrote, "The truth was never too loud. The room was just too small." Then I closed it gently and placed it on my windowsill. The next day, a letter arrived in the mail, handwritten, no return address. Just the initials LB. I sat on the floor to open it. Old habits. I used to sit on the floor every time I opened rejection letters from grad schools, or birthday cards from relatives that never included my name, just love, the family. This time, it was 3 pages long. Linda's handwriting was neater than I remembered. "Mariah, I was wrong. About a lot of things. About what strength looks like. About what makes someone dangerous. About what makes someone brave. I thought I had to control the room because I was scared of what would happen if you did. I was afraid you'd break everything. But the truth is, you didn't break anything. You just stopped pretending it wasn't broken already. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I see you now. Not as a burden, not as a liability, but as a mirror. And you showed us what we were too proud to face. If you ever want to talk without audience, without agenda, I'm here. If not, I'll stay quiet. Like I should have been from the start. Linda." I folded the letter, didn't cry, didn't shake, just sat there for a while, watching the light shift through the blinds, thinking about how long it takes for people to see something they've spent years avoiding. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Some truths don't require echo. A few days later, I received an official letter from the board of Blake Holdings. It read, "Dear Ms. Blake, we are writing to inform you that the board has unanimously agreed to retain you as proxy and advisor, citing your clarity, objectivity, and long-term strategic insight. In addition, A seat has been reserved for you in all upcoming legacy planning sessions. We trust your voice and your vision. Sincerely. The board? I stared at the page for a long time. Then I placed it in a folder labeled Proof They Heard Me. I didn't frame it. I didn't post it online. It wasn't a trophy. It was a timestamp of when the room stopped spinning and started listening. The night of the fourth unmuted mic. Ava pulled me aside and said, "You know you can rest now." Right. I laughed. Maybe, but I'm not tired. And I wasn't. Because for the first time in my life, my voice wasn't a warning sign. It was a welcome mat. And whoever walked through that door next, they wouldn't be asked to lower their voice to be heard. They wouldn't be told they were too much. They wouldn't need to prove their pain was real, because I'd already proved it. And I left the mic on. The 10th gathering of the unmuted mic came with rain, a slow, steady drizzle that blurred the streetlights and softened every sharp edge on the city. It didn't stop anyone. They still came wet coats, fogged glasses, boots squeaking on the tile. They carried journals, guitar cases, voice memos on their phones. Some brought nothing at all, just themselves. There was no sign outside anymore. We didn't need one. People knew. Inside. The room glowed gently with warm string lights. The chairs were no longer in neat rows. They curled into half-moons and overlapping circles, like bodies naturally folding closer to something kind. The snack table was still humble crackers, tea, a donation box labeled, "If you've got $1, that's enough." Ava and I set up the mic stand like always. She adjusted the height while I untangled a cord that never quite wanted to behave. It had become a ritual, not just technical setup, emotional grounding. We didn't pick a theme. We never did. The room always decided what needed to be said. That night, the stories were softer. A woman spoke about her father's empty chair at Thanksgiving. Not angry, just factual, quiet, held in a voice that knew too much and said just enough. A boy read a poem he'd written on the bus ride over, his hands shaking, words tumbling like loose change. Someone sang, no preamble, just a voice in the dark, singing something sad and slow and ancient sounding. No one clapped. No one needed to. The moment held itself. Then, just before the last speaker, Ava looked at me. "You should close it," she said. I hesitated. What would I even say? She smiled. Anything. Or nothing. So I stood up, walked to the mic, and waited. Just breathing. People leaned in, not with anticipation, but with presence. I finally said, "I used to record pain because I thought no one believed it unless it echoed. But the older I get, the more I realize, some things don't need to be replayed to be real." I paused. I don't have a dramatic story tonight. No fresh betrayal. No moral twist. I just want to say this: I'm still here. Soft nods. A few tears. One whispered thank you from somewhere near the back. I used to think survival had to be loud. I said, but peace doesn't need an audience. That was it. I stepped back. Someone walked up next, a girl no older than 16. She didn't say her name. Just read a short list from her phone. Things she no longer apologizes for crying during commercials, needing time to respond to texts, laughing too loud in public, saying no without explaining, existing without a filter. When she finished, she looked up at me and smiled like we were in on the same secret. We were. After the gathering, we stayed late to clean up. Someone left a thermos of hot tea by the mic stand. No note, just warmth. Someone else had tucked a folded paper heart under the donation jar. Inside, written in pencil. I didn't speak tonight, but I heard myself anyway. I drove Ava home afterward. The rain had stopped, but the streets still shimmered. She leaned her head against the window. eyes half closed. Do you remember? She said quietly. When they called you dramatic at the intervention, I nodded once. She turned to me. What would you say now? If they said it again, I smiled. Not bitter, not triumphant, just soft. I'd say, thank you. She blinked. Seriously. Yeah, I said. Because calling me dramatic was their way of confessing they heard me. They just didn't know what to do with the truth. Ava laughed. Not mocking. Just surprised. You really have made peace with it, haven't you? I didn't answer right away. I was watching the traffic light shift from red to green, the glow reflected on the wet asphalt. Then I said, not peace, just place. I found the right place for the pain, and once it had a home, it stopped screaming. The car was quiet after that, but not silent. Ava hummed softly to herself, a song I didn't recognize but didn't want to interrupt. When I got home, the apartment smelled faintly of lavender and ink. I had left the notebook open on my desk, the last page I'd written still exposed. The truth was never too loud. The room was just too small. I turned the page, wrote one final line. And now, the room is wide enough for all of us. I closed the notebook, tucked it away in the drawer, not because the story was over, but because I didn't need to read it out loud anymore. The next morning, I checked my phone. No urgent texts, no crisis emails, just a voice memo from Ava. Hey, I just wanted to say, you built something that doesn't need you to hold it up anymore. It stands on its own now, and I think you can finally rest, not because the work is done, but because you're not doing it alone. I listened to it twice, then once more, with my eyes closed. She was right. I got dressed, watered the plants, and went for a walk. No plan, no playlist, just my steps and the wind and the sound of things continuing. A woman passed me on the sidewalk and said, "Excuse me, are you Mariah?" I nodded. She looked down, suddenly shy. I came to Unmuted last month. Didn't speak, but I brought my sister. She wrote a song after. We hadn't talked in years. I didn't know what to say. She looked back up. Thank you. For the mic. For the room. I smiled. It's your room now, too. She nodded and kept walking. I stood still for a moment longer, letting the city pass me. No urgency, no spotlight, just stillness. I used to think power looked like someone listening to you. Now I know it's what happens after. When the room stays open, when someone else steps forward, when your voice isn't needed and that feels good. And in that moment, I understood the strange kind of peace I'd been walking toward all this time. Not closure, not resolution, just this: I told the truth. They heard it, and I'm still here.